Welcome, everyone, to the What Drives You podcast, where our focus is personal growth. I mean, big goals and achievements are great, but what we most enjoy is the daily pursuit of a great life. I'm Kevin Miller, your personal growth curator and guide. In this episode, we're going to look to our health and wellness. This body that we have is the vehicle that drives everything we do, so we need it in top working order. So we're going to look at how to better process your food for more energy and better performance. So clinically, we hear a lot about gut health and the microbiome. Well, I'm not a doctor, so in layman's terms, the idea is we eat food, we chew it up, we swallow it, and boom, it goes down into our system, which is the processing plant, if you will. So how is your processing plant doing? Is it able to break things down, to get out nutrients that it needs, to turn things into energy and vitality? Well, I'm with Randy James, who is a medical doctor and functional medicine practitioner. We're going to talk about what happens, what we want to happen, and how to make it happen so that we are getting the necessary benefits from our food. If what you hear is interesting, you got a question, a comment, let me know. Let Dr. Randy James know. Email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. I am thrilled to engage with you specifically on these topics. Hey, what drives us, that's what becomes our reality. So let's create a better reality right here and now. All right, drive with me a moment. We're going to talk again about processing our food and the benefits that we're getting from it and that we should get from it and how we can get it from it. I had some things that didn't seem right internally. And so you said, get a poop test.
Yeah.
In layman's term, get a poop test. And so I did. We're going to talk about that as you would talk with any patient from a functional medicine standpoint at looking at what's going on. So this is relative to a lab test, looking at blood, poop, whatever, and figuring out what's going on internally. So you said, yeah, let's do a show on microbiome right there. So layman's terms, what are you talking about?
I'm kind of excited about this show because it's the first time we've really parsed out a specific subtopic like this. This is what we do. So, like everything else, you can get overly complex too fast and it ceases to become meaningful to an individual. So 50,000 foot view, we're looking down at you as a human being. And like every other human being on the planet, 2 eyes, 2 legs, generally you want peace and joy and love and happiness. And all of us, in order for you to go and be Kevin Miller, you have a gut, mouth to anus. So when we talk GI tract, gut, it begins with your lips and ends with your anus. And in between all of that is the microbiome. So the microbiome, and today we'll be talking about kind of the specific ending of the GI tract. So colon mostly is where you've got several trillion critters, bacteria that are living and breathing and thinking and hoping and dying and having kids and doing what they do inside of you, and it pertains to your wellness or lack thereof.
Well, and so let me ask that. So I'm going to eat food at some point, and hopefully it'll be decent food. So let's say I have some fish and some veggies. I'm going to chew it up. Hopefully I'm going to chew a lot, so my saliva gets in there and helps break it down. I'm going to swallow it. It's going to go down my esophagus. It's going to go into my stomach, start being digested. And my hope is that I will get out of it beneficial.
Great poop.
Well, okay, before that, beneficial nutrients that are going to go feed my brain and my muscles. So today when I go on a ride or a run, I feel good, I perform good.
Yeah.
During it,
I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
Because you've already mentioned like 6 things that we could parse out. And you said, hey, I'm going to eat food.
Yeah.
And it's going to start off with, I'm going to chew it up. And I would say there's actually the cephalic phase of digestion.
No idea what that means.
Brain phase. So before you even put something in your mouth, you have thought about it.
Okay.
And you have done this for 50 years. So the Pavlov dogs.
Yeah.
Okay. So you smell onions and savory something and you salivate.
Tonight, tonight I'm going on a getaway just by myself.
I bet you're salivating now.
I am salivated already now to think, because I'm going to wait and see, what do I want? It's going to be, I'm going to imbibe probably a seafood chimichanga from my favorite place, or a like salmon burger and sweet potato fries, or I don't know. I'll see what I'm in the mood for.
This morning at breakfast, you said I'm giddy about it.
I was thinking about it yesterday when I decided to do the getaway.
Okay, so we're 24 hours ahead of time. That has already had an impact on your microbiome.
Okay.
Now imagine if it's not fortunate people like us who don't have giddiness considering the next meal. It might be as bad as it's McDonald's and I don't even think about it, or it might be bad as some people are like, food hurts me.
Or I don't know if I'll get to eat.
Or I don't even know where the next meal is coming from. So already we're at the 50,000 foot view saying, okay, yes, we're going to parse out how many billion critters of this kind and that kind. But we acknowledged it this morning. We had a cup of coffee. We enjoyed it. It's the French paradox idea. If we're going to imbibe, but we don't feel guilty about it, we feel celebratory with it.
Yeah.
All of those things are going on the cephalic. So that's cephalic means brain or head. And so the cephalic phase of digestion, and we just don't speak enough to it. I mean, we do in our clinic, and you and I do it all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's a joyful kind of thing. So recognizing people out there who are on the other side of that, you can change your attitude, your mind. You can be training your mind to look forward to rabbit food or whatever. I know it's hard, but it does have an impact on your microbiome.
But can I, from a layman's term, still say we're talking about food's coming in, what benefit or not am I getting out of my body, and then ultimately I'm going to poop it out. And I was looking at some problems. So you said get a stool test. It's not about poop, but it's about what it showcases that's going on within me. And we're going to bubble it down or bubble up or boil down to you literally. So you've got on your computer in front of us all these results that came out and said, this is what's happening in Kevin.
Yeah. It's kind of like doing an analysis of your car engine by capturing your exhaust.
An emissions test.
An emissions test, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yes. And just like it's a very not great test for your car health, so that example breaks down a little bit. But let's just say, what if that was a good example? Like,
to some degree it is. I mean, back, we don't even have to do them in Colorado, but
the emissions test back in California.
Yeah, or when I was in Tennessee, you had to do that. So before you get your license or renew your tags, or whatever you go and see, is it blowing out too much junk, polluting the environment? And of course, if it is, that's a telltale sign that inside that engine,
you're very inefficient. You're wasting
gas gets out and deterioration. And
so my favorite example is we've driven behind people with that white smoke.
Yeah,
and it really stinks. It makes me nauseated.
It pains me too.
It pains me. I get mad at them.
Well, but I also look and say that is not sustainable, man. That car is going to die.
That's right. That's right. But it's not dying right now.
No.
Like it's going 80 miles an hour. It's life. These people might be just saying, yeah, I'll get around to it. Or they might be completely unaware. Mm-hmm. It's a good example of how the problem with the car is not the smoke. It indicates something.
Right.
Okay. That's where we are with poop.
So,
okay.
Well, with any indicator. So somebody did a blood test, poop
test,
spit
salivary
test.
Yeah. All of those kind of things are we as doctors, car doctors, trying to look upstream into your metabolism to ascertain something, so that your head can be becoming more aware of what your health status is, however we want to language that.
Now, you said there's all these critters. You use that term a lot. So there is for us to digest, to assimilate, to whatever, there's bacteria, good bacteria, and there can be bad bacteria. So this one would tell if I had bad bacteria, right?
I'm going to change the way you speak because we don't go good or bad. Like right now, if we swab part of your GI tract right in your mouth, if I swab your throat, are there streptococcal bugs
well,
there?
because you've taught me, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are they bad?
Well, only if they manifest into strep throat and I can't swallow.
Right. But are they manifesting, or is it your body's response to a normal amount, but you imbibed too much last night, didn't get enough sleep. And so your immune system to quote Mater, one of my favorite cartoons, he misinterpreted your strep, and your immune system got all mad and you got sick.
Okay. Well, I was and literally thinking about, because I took a picture and posted a couple weeks ago of me on a trail run drinking from a high mountain stream. And of course, as somebody always does, they says, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. Did you put, what do they say, iodine or whatever? Did you get Giardia?" And so I'm thinking about that. Did I?
Yeah. Almost guaranteed you did.
Okay.
But did it manifest in gassy, bloated, constipation, diarrhea? Maybe, maybe not.
Well, because I've been drinking from high mountain streams for 2 decades.
So
and
maybe you've acclimatized.
Maybe so.
And this is kind of that hygiene hypothesis that are we all kind of too clean? And so when we get a COVID or a high mountain stream, it tips us over in a way that our immune systems aren't used to, and then we interpret it as illness.
It's still so important though, even with that, because you're saying, because I'm looking at the odds. My layman's ignorant brain is thinking, I'm going to take a drink. It's high enough. I probably won't get Giardia, meaning there won't be Giardia in this and I won't get it. And you're saying chances are it was in there, maybe a small amount.
Yeah.
And what my body is supposed to do, just like it was back with the settlers when that's all the only place that they drank, is it should be able to get that and deal with it.
And that's why today is interesting, because
what are you going to tell me? I've got it?
Well, it's you have, so there's the Giardia line, and on your particular thing, and so as we switch over to using your lab test to talk about this, on page number 1, and here you can, I want you to be able to look at it, but chapter 1 is what they call the pathogens, the bad guys. And you've heard of these words: C. diff, Campylobacter, Shiga. Remember E. coli? This is Jack in the Box E. coli. Remember that one back in the 80s?
Yeah.
That's the 0157.
Well, we still see that. E. coli in, I mean, I'm getting used to seeing it in these bagged salads now.
The Mexico salads, and that's right. But there's 50 different kinds of E. coli. Like this one's called that, 0157.
So I have a normal amount.
No, this is your result.
Does that not say normal?
Well, that's what defined normal is. But here's my point. So your result is less than detectable levels, less than DL. So because the lab knows it's pointless, if we look hard enough, we will find Giardia in you.
Okay.
And E. coli and Shiga toxin.
It's kind of like the thing of people talking about pesticides and all at this point here in America.
All worldwide.
Oh.
Eskimos.
Okay.
And those studies have been done too. If you take cord blood, like this kid just got born and we're going to pull cord blood out. This is baby blood in the womb, theoretically the most protected. And there's 50 different toxins that are in Eskimo land.
Okay.
So these toxins aren't going away. Can the earth clean itself? Now we're getting into a different topic, and to a degree, yes. So there's always hope. Like we can make, just like our own bodies can heal, the earth can heal too. But in this particular case, we're looking at, how do we ascertain and make sense of, this is like an innerverse, a universe within you, and we're just cracking the surface.
Okay.
We are just barely starting to understand microbiome, and heck, the genetics of the critters, right? Like their genes are a whole nother level of understanding. And so my first point to all patients is to say, okay, look at this. And they're like, oh, holy cow, do I have C. diff? Do I have E. coli? And like, yeah.
Salmonella.
You got it.
Okay.
But
barely, so it's just.
Recognize that it's normal to have it. So they don't even bother counting less than in the Giardia case, times 10 to the third, so 500 critters per milliliter or whatever the measuring sticks are. So let's just say it's a milliliter of stool. There's 500 countable critters in there. At 501, you're going to get a red flag to say, maybe that's a bit too high. But you see the ridiculousness of your gut doesn't know the difference between 501 or 2 or 10,000 versus 0. So my point to people is recognize that salmonella and all these kind of things are part of your microbiome.
Okay.
Therefore, don't call them bad. Don't call COVID bad. Don't call viruses bad. What's bad is how's your immune system tolerating or not tolerating.
Yeah, because I look at this and go, okay, all those things, again, layman's perspective on it, all those things are existing in me. I am living in a way that is increasing or decreasing the probability of them manifesting.
Well said, Kevin.
Thanks.
You're way back in 2020, but you have said that so well. That's it.
Okay.
And so I've got some, herbal tea here, and theoretically my microbiome likes that. We have evidence to suggest, but I don't go walking around saying, ooh, Popeye, bigger muscles, or I feel energetic to go run faster. But every moment of every day, and we talk about that all the time, you are predisposing your propensity or your risk for this or that.
Which I would say, over the past, so out of the holidays of imbibing.
That's right.
Late nights.
Okay, so we can then say, if we did another stool on you now, after 2 or 3 weeks of late nights, lack of sleep, and imbibing more and more, is there a difference in the microbiome? Yeah. Does it increase the propensity for you to call squishy guts or whatever you call it when things get out of whack and your tolerance level is now lower? Sure. But the complexity of trying to read that in a lab, and so you and I are talking to each other, looking at each, but if you imagine a X and Y axis chart, a graph, and a bar graph. So the Y is how many 1,000 million billion critters, so that's going up in a bar, and the X-axis is how many different kinds of critters are in you. Mm-hmm. So, like almost everything in science, when I was in school back in biochemistry in the 80s in high school, college, and they began talking about phytonutrients, we never knew that resveratrol was in wine or stuff like that. Let's use resveratrol. It's a phytonutrient, a phytochemical. Well, take an apple or take wine, and back then they said, we found these 10 things in there. It's really amazing. And of course, in 2000, it's 100 things. And of course, in 2020, it's, we better just stop numbering them because there's 1,000 things in carrots. And we have kind of like zero idea of what they're all doing and the interactions. And now we're going to pull in the microbiome. And what are those 1,000 things in a carrot interacting with a few billion, trillion critters in your gut? Mm-hmm. And so the amount of families of, everybody's heard of lactobacillus and bifido and all that kind of stuff. Probably thousands. And way over here, so imagine the bar graph, lacto and bifido, you should have, 10 billion of those things, so the bar goes really high. But way out for Kevin Miller and Giardia, maybe your body likes having 16 or 106. Mm-hmm. We just don't know. And maybe it likes it. Like the absence of Giardia actually causes harm because it doesn't signal the immune system. We need to do a whole nother show on this, but me and my son have been doing worms, helminths we actually stopped, didn't really do anything. We couldn't feel any symptoms, which I think is kind of a good thing that my gut handled. We went way up to max dose of these helminths and didn't perceive anything good or bad.
Meaning, okay, layman's term, putting bacteria in.
Yeah, they're not bacteria, they're helminths. They're worms.
It's disgusting sounding, but that's another show.
But it's another story, but it's the hygiene hypothesis of we are meant to be in communion or in a symbiotic relationship with the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the people we hang out with.
The dirt we walk on.
Or don't. You and I don't walk on dirt because, number one, it's dang cold. Number two, it's rocks, and it hurts. So when was the last time you were barefoot on the ground?
Well, that's an unfair statement because I'm actually thinking about it lately and grounding, the concept of grounding. Yeah. So I'm trying to put my foot or my finger. I went out and rode last week and I was sitting there on the rocks, but then I literally took my fingers out of my gloves and stuck them in the dirt for 5 minutes and just sat there from a grounding
and these
concept.
days, if you build these greenhouses or ecological whatever, there's grounding wires into your bed.
Like copper, I think,
So... But the complexity of that, like we need to do a show on the body electric, the electric nature of the body and the brain. So that's point number one is don't call them good or bad.
Okay. But I did want to, before we left, I'm either increasing or decreasing my propensity for some of these to manifest in a bad way. That even over these last weeks, as I've eaten more sugar, more dairy, more gluten, late nights, whatever, there's been some sickness going around in the family a little bit. I'm thinking I'm opening the door. However, it's also affected, as you talked about, my mindset. There's more joy, more laughter, fun, games, peace, just having
maybe
vacation
more sleep.
time. Yeah, actually overall, even though with late nights, more sleep. So again, I'm looking at that balance, that thing of not every day is perfect, but overall, am I balanced enough to today? I feel pretty good.
That's right. And that's where in a culture that wants to pin the doctors down to give me the milligram dose of a pill or a food that I need to be okay. Can't do it.
Even you saying, okay, it'd be best if you took in these nutrients from, say, vegetables. But again, how much am I getting out of it? How much am I assimilating? Or am I just pooping it all out?
Right. And I can't tell you.
Or is it stuck up in me somewhere?
And what about your cephalic phase? Yeah. Like, did you enjoy those carrots or do you hate carrots every minute of it? And so you don't salivate because you hate the stuff.
Yeah.
That complexity is what we want to open people's awareness to.
Absolutely. And there's the number one thing of this show is awareness.
Well, so this will be interesting because you mentioned gluten and stuff like that. So we're going to come to these things. So part two. So at the end of the day, we would look at this and say, okay, you don't have any scary bad guys.
What was the first title, the headline?
Pathogens.
So bacterial pathogens, I'm okay. So come down to the next one that had Giardia. No, go up there. Parasitic pathogens, which Giardia was one. And again, I'm okay.
Right, and this is the class of stuff that I've been eating on purpose.
Oh, okay.
Right, called a different kind of helmet.
So next is viral pathogens. Is that it? Only those two?
And so noro, so people who are in the cities. Yeah, so a few years ago, and rotavirus is in there, and RSV. There's hundreds. Okay. But only a few of them kind of camp out in the gut.
So I'm okay so far.
Okay there. So this is a famous one called H. pylori.
I've heard you say it.
So H. pylori is a kind of bacteria, less than detectable levels, but normal is present, potentially. Because actually we don't know, because people who are quote unquote normal don't go get their poop tested, right? So we don't know, but it's theorized that H. pylori is in 20% of the world's population. So based on that, we cannot call it pathologic anymore. So then we could look at your blue eyes and say, ooh, that's pathologic. You can start to make some associations, though. If we ever said blue eyes equaled more brain cancer, then we would start to say, okay, why? And so H. pylori is famous. Do you know what it's connected to? Ulcers. So this is the driving force behind many people who get ulcers. But what about if you have H. pylori and you're Caucasian and you are going through a divorce and you're stressed out and whatever? So which one was it? Is it the H. pylori leading to the ulcer, or H. pylori in that environment?
When you say ulcer, you've got ulcers from a big mass somewhere in your body to even just
the gastric ulcer.
Oh,
I have a peptic ulcer.
Okay.
That, which in the past we blamed on stress.
Yeah.
Now, most people, so this actually got discovered, these guys got the Nobel when I was in med school, mid-90s. And now everybody says, oh, an ulcer, well, you probably have this and you should take some Pepcid. And nobody thinks, oh, well, how's your marriage? And how's your job? And how's your whatever? But they should.
Yeah.
Because 20% of the world doesn't walk around with an ulcer.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, back to the propensity. If you are going to live a executive American stressed out kind of lifestyle and you happen to have H. pylori in there, you are more likely to get sick.
Okay.
So the typical American executive goes to me, the doctor, and says, test me for H. pylori and give me if I have it, don't make me change my lifestyle. Give me the antibiotic. Yeah. That's right.
Okay.
So I'm going down through this, and so a lot of people will be positive here, and it comes across as red, and they're like, oh my gosh, I have a bug. And since Louis Pasteur, we have been thinking that's the cause of my problem. Mm-hmm. Fix it.
Yeah.
Right? That fix it mentality. And I say, well, hang on. It's this complex series of whatever. But in your case, we would say, well, your squishy guts are less likely due to some kind of H. pylori thing. But so that's 1 times 10, so 100. Let's say you have 99. Maybe you do have enough H. pylori in there. And that makes people so frustrated because I'm like, this is not a perfect test. It's squishy. And maybe it missed it on you. Well, then why did I spend $200 on the test? Because it's the best we have. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, don't look. Okay. So H. pylori is not there on you. The next one is, what about the normal bacteria? So out there in the world, people listening, and they can buy tests to look at their own microbiome and their lactobacillus and bifido and things like that. And so this is what people are trying to count. Now, this particular company highlights, 10 different families. And people have heard about lactobacillus and the bifido and things like that. And then over here, like if we go, the number one is this guy, the Bacteroides. You have 2.59 times 10 to the 11th. So we're in the several trillion per milliliter, right? Like, remember when I joked around with our Friday morning guys and I was like, guys, you don't understand. When you have a bowel movement in the morning,
it's a miracle.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
1 billion critters just got shocked into the toilet water of whatever, and then they get flushed into the world. And the world, there's many more of these critters than there are of us. And so just to step back and say the awareness of it, the miracle of it.
Thank God for that poop. Holy
there is some truth to that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we look at you and you see all these high ones. And I would say, okay, is that a bad thing? In the interpretation of this, it's barely, so that is barely above the upper limit of normal.
Yeah.
So my counsel would be like, okay, maybe don't drink so much river water out there and tweak your microbiome in that way. But in America, we're more worried about people being on the low side.
Okay.
All right. So with the good guys, if anything, you're trending high, but not severely in all of the, there's no logarithmic differences, maybe one logarithm on those kinds. So nothing is screaming at us down the normal pathway. And we kind of say, okay, there's not evidence of you're not having dysbiosis because of a lack of critters in there.
Okay.
Now they might be overgrown, and we're getting ready to come to that. So dysbiosis, dysfunctional biome, is the opposite of what I said we should be in relationship, symbiotic.
Okay.
Right? So sympathy, simpatico, all of these kind of words, a communal togetherness. We're in this together. We're mutually beneficial to each other in a friendship and stuff like that. Right. Symbiotic relationship versus, and you see the word here, these bacteria tend to be opportunistic and they can lead to overgrowth and dysfunction. And here again, nothing really screaming, but here I would say, okay, now we're pulling in your good guys, which are on the high side, and does that translate into these other guys that are potentially high? Many of them you don't have. Like, we'd rather not be able to count Klebsiella, and these tend to be in the bad guys too. So nothing really screaming at us there that's making a classic make sense of your gut, your squishy guts. So potentially, these are all normal.
And just give the headline. I mean, the headline's opportunistic bacteria, potential autoimmune triggers. So keep going.
Well, but again, that speaks to the fact that we can't call these bad guys because if they overgrow, they can become bad, and they're strep, right?
Yeah.
So next is the fungal category, fungi and yeast. And even though this doesn't highlight it, here they say, like, this is the most famous two, the Candida saprophytica and Candida albicans. In my interpretation, we like to see nothing there.
Okay.
why do they say, well, normal can be whatever? And I'd say, well, how did you get that data? Did you test Americans? Because Americans tend to eat a lot of sugar, and maybe that's why Americans normally have an amount of fungi growth in there, and maybe it should be a little bit lower. Like, that's the squishy nature of the test. Right. Through my lens, we like to see nothing there. So to a Kevin Miller who says, gosh, I'm a little squishy, and gosh, over the last 3 months or 6 months, I've been imbibing a little bit more, I'd say, yeah, probably too much sugar for you. Because you don't, if we compare you to the rest of America, you're not going to register on too much sugar. But for your gut, at that amount of time, we would interpret this and say, okay, that's a surprising result.
And for the goal of the performance I want to be at.
That's right. Yeah. With no squishy guts.
Right.
And somebody else might say, well, I don't mind squishy guts and, bad poops and whatever else. But if it means you got to stop your mountain bike ride and poop 3 times, maybe you do care. And you do care. So then I would look at that and say, okay, what are you going to do in response to that? How would we give your gut a different signal to turn down the amount of fungal species that are now countable, visible in your gut? And I'd say, well, we could give you an antifungal medicine. We can give you antifungal herbs. We could have you feed them less, so less carbs, less sugar, less whatever, increase fasting. And if you really wanted to do it all, full bore, I'd say, okay, do all of that for 30 days.
Yeah.
And then poop again. So not a bad kind of result there, but kind of surprising in you. And I think that this is a big one in America. And by the way, on my son 2 years ago, off the charts. We're going to re-poop him. Oh, no, we already did. And it came back down, but his hair didn't grow. Down the autoimmune, whatever. Okay, there's those viruses again. So Epstein-Barr, famous one, cytomegalovirus. These are famous. Everybody has them. It's just, are you in a proper relationship with them?
And apparently I am.
Probably. Okay, parasites. So here's I purposefully was eating some of these kind of things. The one that I was doing was in this family down this guy. And these words are even more unfamiliar to people. So protozoa, worms, all underneath the category, the family of parasites. And so when I will ask somebody, did you ever get sick traveling, going overseas? Right? Did you ever get Montezuma's revenge? Did you ever get food poisoning? Those kinds of, and most people, if you throw food poisoning in there, will say, well, yeah, at some point I ate some bad mayonnaise.
Yeah, I actually am sitting here, and I've a couple times.
And that's
30 years ago and 2 years ago. 30 years ago, moved to Holland, racing for a bike team there. And
very different.
Oh my gosh. And a lot more meat, different kinds of meat, different kinds of vegetables. And I had significant intestinal distress.
And so can that have a bearing on you 30 years later?
In Mexico, 2-3 years ago, significant food poisoning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So does it mean that your squishy guts are caused by then, or whatever happened then? No, not causative, but correlative, yes.
Okay.
And can somebody get sick? The story, Mark Hyman, that's his story, is going to India or China or someplace, getting a bug and never getting better. And so that theme, and even if you are getting 90% better and having a 10% hang on, gut not quite right type of a feeling is related to the microbiome. Like you can get a bad bug and then that ecological reality, the status of that in your microbiome just stays.
Yeah.
And how do you undo that? Well, you didn't have any of those things. So this is, and I would say for the people that I talk to, this doesn't come, maybe 5-10% of the time comes back with something. But if we see blastocystis hominis in there more than this, then I'd say, okay, let's treat it. Take a medicine for that.
Okay.
And treat it. And then finally, this is the last batch, which is where you're going to get surprised.
Intestinal health is the headline.
The overall markers of intestinal health.
Yeah.
And so The first one is how much fat are you pooping out? And you want that to be low because fat is energy. So people who have foul smelling stools, a lot of time it's fat coming out. Or if you look down in the water and there's a film of grease on top of the water, you're pooping out fat. And that's white smoke coming out of your rear. Okay. It stinks, right? Like you ought to be burning that in terms of efficient energy transfer into the body. So yours is low. That's good. This one I talk a lot about, Kevin, because you see yours, and most of the labs agree that this number ought to be above 500. You're above even what they can count at 750.
Elastase?
And this is pancreatic enzymes.
Okay.
So when that cephalic phase, and when you start to, like you've had, I'm pleasantly hungry, and then there's the smell of onions and the saliva, and then the grumble.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, getting ready. Yeah. And pancreatic enzymes, which the pancreas is injecting that right into the small intestine, which comes right after your stomach. Your stomach is producing juices and stuff like that. All of that is very normal. We don't think about it, but it's very complex and very, very necessary and very messed up in America.
Okay.
And that's why people have gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, and we just call it normal.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of that stuff gets messed up. So pancreatic enzymes, this is the main lab that I'll use to kind of look at people and say, your brain-gut connection is off because your brain isn't teaching or telling your pancreas to make the enzymes. So even though you diligently go and eat some fish and veggies, if you're not making the enzymes, you're not digesting.
Yeah. Which I think I've had struggles with that. But is this saying I'm good?
No, because it's you were taking them at the time, were you not? I don't know that I've seen that 6 times of people above that number.
Okay, well, explain. So you're looking at this.
But we had given you pancreatic enzymes in the past, and now I'm saying maybe this reflects the fact that you had been taking pancreatic enzymes.
And don't need to? I haven't.
No, that's a good result because you are taking them.
Oh.
And you might still need them because you have testified that you feel like they help you to digest. And
I have. I don't think I was taking them then. I haven't in a while.
Our date on this was November receipt. Yeah, you did it.
I haven't. I wasn't taking them then.
Okay.
Yeah,
and that's a good sign.
Okay.
Especially if you feel like you are digesting better than you were.
Yeah.
And this is the world that, as we have done lots of shows on the brain, your theoretical weak spot is the meditative kind of slow down. But you and I have done a lot of work on meditating our food.
Yeah.
Taking the deep breath, gratitude, joy.
And I have just been in general, just so much more awareness of the moment by moment anxiety, peace, calm. Yeah.
That is those are the tilling of the soil in preparation to have a really great microbiome and not
process.
Which from mouth to anus we say, okay, it's not just back in the 80s there was even some commercials. Poop is poop. Wasn't there was some odd even the GI doctors back then would say, look, poop is poop. Who cares? If it's a log, if it floats, if it's this, if it's that, poop is poop. And these days, we can't believe that we actually thought that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, yeah.
So I would look at this, and if you say, no, I think I was off of it, I'd say that's a really good marker that then you and your brain can say, okay, self, good job.
Okay.
That's encouraging to know. Next, these particular GI markers, beta-glucuronidase, are related to how your microbiome, these are byproducts, smoke from the actual microbiome. Okay? And the beta-glucuronidase is at a good level. Of course, we don't want to see any blood. You don't have any blood. So most of your immune system is in the gut. And most of that immune system is spent where you are interfacing with the world. And that is in your mouth, right? You are taking the outside world, shoving it in and breathing it in every second of the day. And so that's where you have this lymph node and then this one and then a lot all the way down. the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And most of what it is secreting is secretory IgA, immunoglobulin labeled A. So there's A and G and M and all that. And this says, well, you can't be too low and you shouldn't be too high, and you're right in the middle. So, okay, great. And then we have a couple of surprise things. So anti-gliadin, do you know what that's in reference to? Mm-hmm. So if this is the only piece of data we have, and in your question mark of some of the foods that you should eat or shouldn't eat, I would say, Kevin, that is this is not perfect, but it's about as good a data as we can get. If you have any suspicion as to your reaction to gluten,
negative reaction.
That is a negative reaction to gluten.
Sensitivity, intolerance.
Your immune system doesn't like it.
We want to say, people use the word, I feel like even in my family, too much allergy. Is that, where do you come along?
Parlance, the languaging of allergy tends to mean inhalant.
Okay.
Right, like cat, dog, dust.
Okay.
Okay, then there's food allergy, and that tends to mean peanuts.
Okay.
And Will Smith getting fat lips when he ate seafood on the movie, and that is what people tend to think. This tends to be called sensitivity.
Okay.
Because this can move. It can get complex. What if you ate that particular piece of gluten in the state of fatigue and tiredness and bad attitude and stress or even more complex, what if you ate it with dairy?
Right.
With too much sugar.
Which is, interestingly, I
probably
rarely ever have gluten without dairy.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, this is my story now, growing up in America with an allergist father saying it doesn't matter what you eat, poop is poop. And the recognition back then in the 70s and 80s that nearly every meal, every snack has do you remember the 4 food horsemen of the apocalypse?
Gosh, yeah.
Dairy, gluten, corn, soy.
Gosh. Yeah.
The commodity foods. So high fructose corn syrup came about in the late 70s, early 80s. And my mom would brag about 5 Alive juice.
Oh, right.
Fake juice that became Sunny D.
Yeah, which is
it's just
sugar.
I can't.
Liquid
it's
sugar.
anathema for me to even think of. And so the combination of those foods within a GI tract, again, as your immune system is going. Imagine the submarine, wonk, wonk, wonk. He just ate some of these things and now it's plopping down into the gut. And oh my gosh, he's stressed. And oh my gosh, he didn't get enough sleep. And oh my gosh, the idiot wants to go ride 2 hours now. What is going on? And it has to respond. And in you can go ride 2 hours, but you get squishy guts or you get your rash on your face.
So let me ask about this, because here you are, you're saying this relates to, so here's a poop test that relates and shows you're seeing, I think you've got a problem, a sensitivity, intolerance, whatever, with gluten. Over here on my side, I would, outside of knowing that, I would tend to say, I don't perceive that. I would be one of those people who go, gluten doesn't bother me.
That was me too. My similar test, I don't know if I told you that story, but Denver, 10 years ago?
Denver,
right?
your
my
old
former
partner.
medical partner, right? Because, the lab companies will give us freebies and we do the tests on ourselves. And I'm like, and I got the blood work that said, you're sensitive to gluten. I don't believe that. It doesn't bother me a bit. And Denver's looking at me going, what are you talking about?
Obviously it does.
You would not let any patient say that.
Yeah. Well, and we have a culture who's constantly says that. I have a problem with dairy. Oh man, it doesn't bother me at all. I got a problem with it.
I can smoke and I'll still beat you in a race.
Yeah. Well, okay. So to everybody who thinks that XYZ doesn't bother them, you don't stinking know unless you get.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, because you don't feel a manifestation, which I don't necessarily. Now let's make it more complex, because I'm tempted to say that if I am going to perform well on my mountain bike ride, race, whatever, that I feel like I do with gluten sometimes. Could that be true, that my body's able to use it for fuel and I can perform, yet it's still harming me over here with an intolerant reaction?
Yes.
which makes it even more complex.
Yeah, right. Do you know what example I'm going to use to make the point? Caffeine.
Okay.
If you wake up in the morning and need coffee to not have a caffeine headache,
right?
Does caffeine make you feel better? Absolutely.
Well, yeah.
Is caffeine the problem?
No.
Absolutely, it's causing the problem.
Well, it is. I mean, we shouldn't need it.
But now you do.
Okay.
And that is very true of these kind of foods.
And that's what I've been bothered with lately, with you talking about that maybe I do perform well on some of these foods, unfortunately, because I've adapted.
With the carbohydrate. Remember when I did my carbohydrate thing, and you're kind of like, I'm not in the mood. I'm really biking, and I just don't want to go through that, because you will go through a stamina drop.
Yeah.
Because your body is used to carbohydrate, gluten kind of fuel.
I was a pro cyclist. I mean, that's what we did.
But we don't know what your pro cycle level would have been if it was fat adapted.
Well, because that's Mark Allen's story. So Mark Allen, one of the most decorated triathletes of all time, and he got together with Perlmutter or somebody, I can't remember, and transitioned out of the carb loading into fat protein. I don't remember the story of if he had a dip or whatever.
Noakes.
Okay.
Do you know him? He wrote the lore of running, like the Bible
okay.
of running,
okay,
long distance running, and he's a South African.
Yeah.
And he's like, I was wrong.
Because we have a friend who was just recently kind of debating with us about carbs and whatever, saying he performed better. He probably is because he's adapted to it. And the argument is that,
but will you, and he also feels better now 3 weeks into it. And he says, I haven't had a headache in 3 weeks. That hasn't been
not
true.
having carbs?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He didn't say that at lunch the other day, but yeah. So no headache. So now he's kind of saying, okay, I recognize the value of that.
Yeah.
But is it worth me feeling a drop in stamina on my whatever to really go into it? And that's where he and I were talking about Heads Up Health and these monitoring things. And in your case, we are monitoring you by looking at your poop.
Oh, okay, well, let's get down to brass tacks then, is why do I care? Because if we're saying that, okay, this shows that I have a sensitivity and yet I don't feel it from a tangible manifestation. I don't feel bad. I even feel like I may perform better on my, cycling, which I enjoy. But then we're saying that it's causing I have a sensitivity. What does that mean? We're going to say
you're very right. Like, what are the brass tacks? And I'm going to use a common example that people think about all the time, because people do go to the doctor and they say, "Doctor, how am I?" And what does the doctor do? You kind of said, "Okay, there's my lab result, and how do we interpret this?"
Yeah, well, and ultimately my question was just around, even though I may not feel a negative impact from the gluten, my performance may seem okay. Right. If this shows a sensitivity, there are consequences.
That's right.
And I care about the long-term me.
So just like everybody else out there has had their blood pressure tested, you don't walk around perceiving your life being impacted, whether you're 110/70 or 120/80 or 140/90. Right. Nobody feels that. And you don't say, oh, it doesn't bother me. Or cholesterol, or your liver enzymes, or a million other things that are going on. People want to be well for a reason that goes back into, what's our motive and our purpose. Mm-hmm. And so for you, we look at this and say, okay, well, you didn't know this, but we can make a pretty good conclusion that you're more sensitive to gluten than you thought that you were.
Yeah.
So that's a different...
So Monday, after my imbibing for the weekend...
That's a different topic. Like, what's the response to that? Because
and that's up to me.
That is up to you, but it doesn't mean that you can't do gluten forever. Can you heal this and train your immune system back down? Probably.
Well, or even if I decide I'm going to do gluten once a week, for my Friday night, whatever, I'm going to have pizza with crust and whatever. But
you can't. Now that might hurt you still.
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, do that for 3 months and let's do a poop test.
Yeah.
That is how we figure things out.
Yeah.
So that you can drive the ship of Kevin Miller into your 53rd year, 4th. I'm so much older than you.
Yes, that's why you have more wisdom.
And steer the ship. Turn left at vitamin D. Turn right.
But even there, how many people, including me, are going to do that? Are going to go and do the test? Limit myself, abstain from that, and then spend another honestly, the test retail is probably
350,
something.
4, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, one final thing. So that calprotectin is 0. That's the one we look at for cancer. And if it shows positive, then I tell people, look, we need to do a colonoscopy.
Okay.
And zonulin is a new thing.
So, which I got a 0. So inflammation, calprotectin.
Yeah, that's good.
0.
The lower the better there, right? Like we're not looking at your messed up GI tract and thinking, gosh, I wonder if you have cancer. You would be shocked, surprised at how many people out there, when they get GI symptoms, they go to gastroenterology and they get a scope and they say, well, you don't have cancer. You don't have
you don't have cancer
Crohn's
today.
disease.
And maybe
well, why do
and,
I have gassy biliary constipation? Well, we think you have IBS. We think your bowels are irritated.
Yeah.
And that's so frustrating because, okay, now what?
All right.
Well, finally, this last one is called zonulin. So I think the guy that found zonulin is going to get the Nobel at some point. So what is zonulin? It's a protein. And you've heard the term leaky gut. Mm-hmm. So here we have to go back. And for everybody out there, your zonulin is really bad, right? Like you're spilling twice the amount of zonulin that you should.
Okay.
So what does that mean? Well, this is new stuff, so we're overreading. So I have to tell you that for sure. This is an overread. Like we're lots of guessing, educated guessing.
Meaning we're outside of the norms.
We don't have standards.
We're into advanced diagnostics.
Without standards. So,
okay.
Right? Like diagnostics are only good if you actually know what it means.
Right. Now, but so are you as a doc, outside of the norm and the standards. And so this one, so you can relate it. You have experiential.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't qualify as randomized controlled trials that.
Which, thank goodness, I don't care because I trust you and your insight.
Even in that trust, I have to, as a trustworthy person, say, I get it. But that still increases the chances that what I'm going to say is actually not true.
Okay, but I'm going to ask you, okay, but based on your discernment, understanding, you're going to say something that has a probability.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And I would read it as positive, meaning negative. That you have a bad result.
Oh, and so what is that?
Okay, so leaky gut is the term that people have now heard, and even the gastroenterologists will say, yeah, this exists. And so what does that mean? Back in the 90s, I was in med school, and I remember this because they say, okay, if here's your gut, and I'm holding up my fingers, and play like your mouth is over here, your anus is over here, and food is going by your fingers, and these are the enterocytes. So the smallest cell that you have, and here's a piece of magnesium and a piece of fat, and your body's going to absorb it through here, and then right here between these cells, they taught us there's a spot of glue. It's called a tight junction.
Okay.
Now, if cholera or giardia, enough giardia is flowing through up here, and the body says, okay, we don't like that anymore, we're going to unloose our tight junctions and flood it and poop that sucker out. And like cholera, you'll poop 20 times of water. You'll poop water 20 times a day. Mm-hmm. If you don't stop the cholera coming in, and that's why the problem is not cholera, it's you're drinking contaminated water from somewhere.
Right.
You'll keep pooping until you die. Like the floodgate, you can't hold your water. That's leaky gut. You should have a leaky gut. You're trying to get rid of cholera or whatever bad thing. That's the value of diarrhea. Again, thank God we can have diarrhea to get it out. But then you want to tighten it back up. Well, instead of it being a simplified spot of glue, imagine each one of these as your shoelaces. Uh-huh. Zonulin is the string.
Okay.
And it can tighten up and loosen up. And of course, it's doing this all the time, every second of the day. What did you just eat? In what context? What's your immune system feeling and all of that? And if we see zonulin here, that means you've broken shoelaces, which means now between some certain area, it's leaky. And the problem isn't necessarily you're going to poop yourself to death. The problem is the next cellular layer. So we're in the microscopic cellular layers is your massive immune system. And if this is open, it's getting signaled danger. The cell danger response.
So I'm compromised.
Well, yeah. And in the extreme, that's exactly what's happened in 2020 and 2021. The cell danger response, otherwise known as a cytokine storm, otherwise known as acute respiratory distress syndrome. And if you have COVID and you have other comorbidities, these people died from what another person's body perceived as a common cold, et cetera, right? Like, so yes, this is potentially your shoelaces breaking to where your integrity is compromised. And that's you are compromised. Now, are you compromised to the point where you have, oh, woe is me, I feel bad, I can't hike, I can't do, no. But neither is the guy with blood pressure or cholesterol or a headache or 1,000 other things going on. But can you do something about it? And yeah. And so that then is back. That's another weight towards your brain that says, well, I don't like that. I want to do another poop test 6 months down the road and see that be better. Okay.
But we see that, but it's not saying, and the culprit is X. No. We don't know that.
We have suspicions because this culprit is gluten.
Yeah.
But we also have an experiential history with you in corn and dairy and those other 4 horsemen things. And so to me as the doc, to you as a patient, I'd say, yeah, man, I would do the dairy, gluten, corn, and soy, 90 days of elimination, and put stuff into your colon to heal those shoelaces.
Yeah.
And then that becomes the herbals and the medicines that we use to help people to do that. And it's really hard because that's very expensive. It's a colossal pain in the rear. Nobody
no
has...
pun intended.
Well, let's just say pun intended.
Okay.
This is a pain in the rear.
Okay, it is a pain.
and you don't feel bad. So you're not going to do this for 6 months. Honestly, for another test plus all this, $1,000 later to say, oh, I feel so much better.
Yeah.
But if we have a normal test, are you going to be able to say, self, you have likely done the work to be becoming the kind of guy that can be 52 and ride my mountain bike?
Yeah. Well, and for my concern, what's this mean if I don't correct it to who I'm going to be at 82?
Then the flip-flop, you are even at 52.
Wow.
You are increasing the chance that this gets bad enough that at 52, you are going to start feeling it.
Yeah.
Not, much less 82.
And I'm normally going to be surprised because I have no idea. Now, I spent $200-$300, whatever, on this thing. I have access to you, and that's not the norm. I mean, this is where the complexity of, but again, this is awareness about what's going on. And hopefully through these shows, people are understanding the primary culprits.
Yeah.
And that,
which we've spent a lot of time talking about those primaries.
They're not benign.
Foundation.
They're not benign. And just because you don't feel a negative manifestation, a tangible manifestation, doesn't mean that they're not harming you.
And to be a pain in everybody's rear, because I know I'm a pain in everybody's rear, they are harming you. And in best cases, you can only last until 90 anyway, and then you're going to croak.
Yeah.
Right? So we live in a hostile world, and we live in a symbiotic, wonderful world. And the question is, okay, being aware, does this mean everybody needs to go spend $400 on a poop test to tell them to don't eat gluten or something? I would say, well, sometimes it depends on the individual and what the symptoms are and what your goals are. Mm-hmm. Those are the people I work with as a physician in the clinic. And, are there ways to do this online? And I would say, yeah, we're working on it. I want people to have access to something like that. But for right now, I think it's the awareness of recognizing that if we did a poop test on people and we said, gosh, something's not looking really good here, the main culprits are still the main culprits.
Yeah.
Don't stress out it's not that you were eating McDonald's, but you were eating in a state of anxiety, stress, and whatever, and you didn't know it. And if this is better, or if that elastase one was better, it's not built on 3 days of mindfulness while you eat. It's been 2 or 3 years now of this process. And now that I've been doing the functional medicine side for 10, 12 years now, we're seeing it took this person 5 years. I'm like, I don't know. But wow, look what you have done 5 years later. You are weller than you would have been. And I said that to somebody who was 85 the other day. That you remember Charlie?
Uh-huh.
Well, he's in his 90s now. That's remarkable.
Well, and we're pointing back to, I think it's our previous show on we are becoming every day something. And this is showing me the probability of becoming better or worse. And that's what I care about. Friends, thanks for joining us on this drive. If you, again, want to connect with us about these questions, email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. You can always find Dr. Randy James and connect with what he's doing and how he can help you at truelifemedicine.com.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and most of all helps you enjoy the ride. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I look forward to meeting you in the Drive Tribe community for ongoing discussions about each episode. You can subscribe to the Drive Drop newsletter for weekly updates. Find it all at kevinmiller.co, along with all our social media and video clips. Until next time, I hope this episode helps you drive further and enjoy the ride.